thank you very much for coming to South Summit. For any of you, is the first time? No, dear friends, since a long time ago. So, AI, artificial intelligence, brings the promise of closing the gap between knowing what to do and effectively and really doing it, execution, and also brings the promise of changing the playbook, how we build the startups. And to discuss about it and what's left and what's is going to improve in the coming months, what is going to be worse, because it could be it could have some problems involved. We have 3 amazing investors. They invested in many startups and they are changing themselves, their playbook to find out new ways of operating as VCs and investing in different companies. So my first question is about experimenting. It's about experimenting, which is cheaper now.
Yep.
Should be cheaper. So how it is changing the startups and the way they grow and the way they deploy their activity?
Yeah, look, that's a very interesting question. I think it's an observation that the cost of experimenting is going down. And basically, when you build a startup, that's what you need to do. You need to experiment to find your product market fit. And if something doesn't work, if you don't have traction, you adjust and you do that over and over again until you get that product market fit. So if an experimentation is expensive, as it used to be in the past, if you require 5 engineers to solve a particular problem, and then you realize that it doesn't lead to the product market fit, you've burned the time of 5 engineers for 5 or 6 months. As of today, you can do that in 1 afternoon. And so that's the big change in paradigm. It's like the way you consume the cash you've raised, if you raise any cash, is completely different. But the flip side of that is that if you don't have any vision, you just keep adding more stuff. And if you don't have the gates to say, okay, this is conducive, this experiment is conducive to reaching product market fit. If you don't have that gate and that clarity of thought and that vision, you will just create more experiments, right? Because it's cheap. And so but it's a change of mindset, you know. And so it can bring a lot of good things, provided that the discipline stays intact.
I have a founder in my portfolio that calls it the problem of the infinite blank canvas.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and before I had 2 side projects, now I have 10 side projects. You know, so that's what it does.
So Luis, they say that the new product manager is the new engineer is the product manager, the new developer is the product manager. Is that a reality in your companies? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you start to see a lot of product managers who have that vision, who have that understanding of what the customer really needs and what are the problems that they really need to solve, and that are now enabled, thanks to AI, to actually build demos, maybe not full-fledged operating products that are like really solid, but they can go like 80-85% of the way with Cloud Code or some alternative, right? So, in a sense, I wouldn't say they're replacing the engineers, like the software engineers. I think the software engineers, especially senior software engineers, are pretty key to kind of like give that like final 15%, which is very important if you want to be able to serve large mid-market to enterprise customers. But you can go a long way without coding knowledge nowadays.
Yeah, maybe adding to this, I think the one interesting thing is sort of paradigm shift is in hardware, we've seen that a lot. Like we've seen a lot of the sort of design in California and made in China, where there was a bit of a disconnect between the thinking and then the execution on product, and we couldn't really feel this in software for a while because you needed these engineers to, and there was a bit of a power shift. There is a power shift now within the organizations where tech was bigger than product. Usually, you had a pizza team with more engineers than product people, and then all of a sudden, there's a bit of a change here where designing, thinking, strategizing where you go is more important now. They're actually the building side of things, which creates a bit of a change in the way companies are run.
It changes we like to think of companies as pre or post GPT in a way. And for companies that are pre-GPT, the speed of adaptation, what you were mentioning about this capacity to experiment, but also the capacity to change the team structure from what you used to need to what you really need in the AI era is quite interesting.
So, Luis, you have saved, for now, senior engineers. What happened with junior engineers? I mean, how we train the next generation of senior engineers if we don't hire interns anymore?
I think to me, and it's going to be music to your ears, coming from the education world.
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge of the industry now. It's like, because a lot of people are like, hey, I don't need these junior people anymore. I'm going to focus on just core understanding, and then the rest will be built. Potentially, to a certain extent, but then how do you create the next wave of senior people again? And I'm not here to say I have a solution for it. That's something that companies should think about, maybe being a bit more specific, maybe keeping one or two, but totally stopping. It's a bit like people who said, hey, we'll never be back at work after COVID. Then they realize, that was probably a bit extreme. So we need maybe a couple of days in the office to create that bond within the company. I think here we are living exactly the same time where people are like very extreme. We don't need juniors anymore. We're going to build everything, with AI. But then if you think long term and, building your assets within your HR department, well, you'd still need to incorporate a little bit of them, right? So maybe stringent in terms of recruiting, but still doing a bit of junior, I think is the solution going forward.
So if anyone can build anything, even without the knowledge, with using generative AI, what's left to defend? Where is the moat?
So first of all, I don't think anyone can build anything. I think anyone can build something. But I understand where the question comes from. I think what needs to happen is to find some kind of defensibility in what you're building. And the defensibility is the thing that will allow to protect your development, your invention, so that the neighbor cannot go after your meal. And how do you do that in the modern era? It's not coding anymore, it's not having the best software engineers, it's having the best vision, but also execute fast. The world has accelerated dramatically, time to market is accelerated, everything needs speed. So speed is essential. If you think we'll see that in 3 months, it's probably too late. The other thing is data. If you rely on public data or on no data to build a service, and you say, I will be the SaaS that human will be using, there's no moat, there's nothing, right? So you can literally ask Claude Code or Lovable for the simple things or whatever other tool to build something for you. That's not sustainable. What you need is data. This data, you can access it in different ways. So we're talking about data that is protected, that is gated, regulatory data, for example. We're talking about data that is very difficult to hard, clinical trials data, this type of data, or data that you collect if you sit on a workflow. So if your product or service allows to improve a workflow over time, then data goes through the workflow, you collect this data, you optimize the process, and you have this data flywheel that keeps compounding and improving your own service. And that's how you differentiate from the others over time with data. There's another thing that we call data gravity like the Earth gravity, where apps and agents tend to get closer to data, just because otherwise they have to figure out where is the data and they cannot use it, right? So data is key. And the last one is always the same thing, is distribution. How do you distribute your service or product faster and better than the others?
I think
How do you see that, Luis?
Yeah, we're quite obsessed with this thing since before AI. For us, we're a generalist fund. We don't have an industry focus, but our theme focus is the visibility around network effects, right? And as you said, data is one of the most obvious ones. I think NFX that you can create at scale in the age of AI. I'm really interested also about the context layer, and I think that's really the next step, what's going to really allow to become a system of action rather than a repository. I was talking the other day with several companies that have bridged their systems of record, so their CRMs and so on. So a lot of people not even connecting to Salesforce anymore, taking a plane to go to the server, to the Snowflake, and connect to Snowflake directly, because it's more efficient for the agents to communicate with Snowflake than with Salesforce. And I think this, what used to be a traditional NFX from a system of record, no longer exists, or exists in a much weaker way. And you really need to be able to generate that context, which is how AI is able to perform tasks in the way that you want them to.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree. The context is the extension of the data, taking into account unstructured documents, structured documents, so that agents can start taking that into account and reasoning and perform the task that they are supposed to perform.
And back to your point, I think, ultimately, if you can create that sort of virtual cycle of network effect, so you build on data and you aggregate and create more and you enrich that data, then overall, that's how you build a moat, because you're building your own citadel here.
Yeah. Has the whole idea of moat has changed? Or
It has. I mean, for a long time, moat was capital, and it's still part of it when you look at the fight between ChatGPT and OpenAI and Anthropic. Obviously, capital is one, but you can also look at it this way, where you can start and test a product with clients with pretty much zero, right? I think there was an era where pre-cloud, you had to build the servers and you needed to code. So putting a first product to market was huge in terms of barrier to entry. Then cloud killed the server end. You're like, hey, now forget about this. This is a commodity, or at least something you can pay monthly, but you still need to build the product. Now you have 15 years old who have cloud capacity and AI that can test the product, and they can go live and test clients. So it goes back to distribution and data, because the whole modes that we used to have are kind of disappearing. Having said that, the speed at which Anthropic and OpenAI distributed their product means that everyone has access to it, in which case everyone has kind of the same weapons, right? So you took some of the complexity of building, but at the same time, people are now having the same tools to build. So create a bit of a different paradigm.
But exactly, but if I had to build a new startup today, I thought about it the other day, how I would do that, right? And I think I would do it completely, I would flip the playbook completely around. So I would talk to potential users, potential clients. I will ask their consent to record the conversation. I will get the transcript. I will summarize the transcript. I would bring my knowledge of architecture and a product manager, feed that into Claude, and I would continue talking to people. And during the night, Claude would build the products, and I would just focus on go-to-market. Yeah. That's how I would start, to find the initial product market fit, and then after that, scaling is another topic. But I agree. I would really flip things around, because behind the scenes, imagine a world in which there is no friction between the brains and how to code. And you can bring those two things together, the brains of all your potential users, everything, and AI. You get the perfect product, and there is no friction. So that's how I would, if I push the thinking until the end, that's how I would approach a new startup today.
But to your point, like you mentioned, we all have the same weapons, right? And I think while speed is going to be key in planting the flag, I don't know, I invest 10 plus years, right? As a business angel in my previous life, I invested 15, 20 years into the horizon. So there's going to be time for others to catch up, to build something competitive. And there's a lot of pressure nowadays because obviously it's a lot cheaper to build. It's a lot faster to build. So you've got competition from other startups around you. Then the incumbents, the traditional dilemma of incumbents getting technological innovation faster than your distribution or vice versa. Well, they're getting innovation faster now, thanks to these tools. So there's a lot of pressure points on your margins, right? And on top of that, now you have your clients who are also enabled to actually build in a faster way in-house. So the buy versus build dilemma, even though I still believe it's a little bit naive to think that some large corporates would actually be able to build some of these tools in-house, they're going to use that argument that, hey, listen, this costs you nothing because you're using AI, so it's going to have a compression effect on pricing and on margins. All these pressures on margin means that you can go as fast as you want, but unless you build that moat, for me, it's not going to be a good investment in 10 years. It might be a really good investment in 1 or 2 if I can exit.
No, but I think the moat is a logical end between speed, data, and distribution. Is not an or anymore. You need to have all of
you need to cover all. And I think to your point, like in the sense of like how do you build companies today? I mean, back in the day, yes, you do sort of customer delivery, and then you go back to the whiteboard and draw and try to build and iterate, and that iteration is still true, but in an order of magnitude which is now compressed to a day. Like and you can keep on enriching your product with client permanently, which is just fascinating. So I think it's changing the way we build, and it's changing the way we build in terms of teams. Once again, probably less engineers, more product, more thinking, more strategy. It's changing the way we build in terms of clients' input as well, almost to a point where in the previous era or the very first industrial revolution, Henry Ford said, "Hey, any color as long as it's black," right? So it was very much like a one size fits all. In a way, SaaS was kind of like this as well. We're like, hey, we're going to build a product that's going to serve everyone, and we're going to put it out there, and it's going to be cool, but everyone's going to get the same release. Now you could imagine a world where every customer has their own release because it's possible. And it's fascinating, right?
Their own what? Sorry?
Release of a product. Everyone can have their own version of it because it's possible.
So actually, a company in our portfolio called Imperia does exactly that for supply chain management. They've they built all the back end, so to speak, but the way the product comes together is via natural language at the customer's office.
Yeah, in the hands of the clients, which is fascinating.
And one thing I want to mention is that what we speak about today is the current capabilities of AI coding agents that develop things. We are in June 2026. It changed radically in December 2025 when Opus 4.5 was released by Anthropic and Claude Code. Claude Code existed before, but the model that changed things is Opus 4.5. So we're talking about something that has 6 months, right? So the capabilities that will come in the next 6 months will continue to reinforce what we're saying today in dramatic ways, right? So, we, as humans, we are not fast enough to adapt to that pace of change. We've never seen that in terms of machines having cognitive abilities to develop software at that pace, right? And so we need to force ourselves to embrace this new paradigm because it's going so fast, And
so let me ask you a question. So now we can build faster using Anthropic and OpenAI models, and having, as Sebastian said, the machines working for us overnight. But they can be learning about our business as well. What prevents Anthropic or OpenAI in the future to take over it, if it is a good business? Because we're talking about using things, which are not ours, actually. Are not capabilities of the company, are capabilities of someone else.
That's a always relevant question for any startup. When I built my second one, people asked me the same about Google. Why doesn't Google build that? And the answer was that they don't care. They have bigger problems. They have bigger fishes to fry. And in the case of Anthropic, their problems are energy problems. They are legal problems or legal things to manage, trust and safety, all these kind of things. So the ideas that we are cultivating, where we use data that is protected, that they don't have access to, or at least yet, it's something they won't go after.
I think it lines up a little bit with whether it's horizontal applications or verticalized applications, and how big the the market in terms of sheer size of tokens used will be, right? And I think a lot of these model layer players are already moving into application layer, but they're moving into consumer applications, they're moving into highly horizontal applications, because when you look at a market that is 15 billion in size, super attractive for a startup building in that market, but 15 billion is what for Anthropic, right? Like it's a drop in the ocean.
No, I fully agree. I think it's a double thing. I think I would agree with you both. I think it's a question of size and a question of accessibility to data. I think anything big enough for a startup, it's probably too small for Anthropic today. Like if you're a $1 trillion company valuation, do you care about a market of 15 billion? Like it's ridiculous, right? It's too small, so you don't care. Like it's too small for you. You don't care. You go somewhere else. But for a startup, it's meaningful, and you can build there, right? And if you start building, with that moat around data, I think the good example is 11 Labs, right? All the big LLMs in the US, they went text first, and these guys built voice for a while, and they created something that's too big to dismiss now. Like it's just a matter of strategic roadmap and all of what you said. Yeah, in theory, the question of hey, I think 40 years ago, it was IBM would do it, then it was Microsoft could do it, then it was Google could do it, now it's Anthropic could do it. Yes, they could. They could do anything. But is it meaningful to them in terms of size? Do they bother doing it? Does it fit into their roadmap? Probably not. They're not going to be building everything.
What you mentioned makes me think like that same shift to voice that was done. Now you see a lot of like companies going for the world model approach. But it opens up a different narrative as an investor, at least when I'm thinking about this, is like, it's very interesting. And if you're able to build something big enough very, very quickly without being noticed, it's fantastic for an investor. But the most likely is that they're already looking at you and they're going to buy you, and they're not going to wait for you to be worth 10 billion to buy you. They're going to try and buy you for 100, 150 million, maybe 200, right? And this early acquisition risk for us as investors, it's a drama, right? Like, I mean, 100 million exit, total value of the company, when your fund is 100 million, it doesn't move the needle enough.
Yeah, which is one of the usual. It's been a problem for years. Well, problem. It's been a situation to solve for years, and it's becoming even more important now. Is that a 200 million exit is a bit of a misalignment between funds and founders. Like as a founder, liquidity event, it's amazing. You get a lot of money. But as a fund, to your point, on a 100 million fund, maybe you can return 20% of your fund, 30% of the fund, which is amazing. But the VC model is built on outliers and on companies that go billions, because there's so many things that could go wrong. There's so many things that A, the team just split up, and B, Anthropic is actually launching the fucking same product, and we couldn't see this coming, but it's coming now. So we need these big exits. And so to your point, I think it's also good that we are living in this sort of AI era with a community of founders and investors in Europe that are a bit more mature, and that repeat founders will probably say, hey, look, the previous one I did 100 exits, maybe I want to do 1 billion exit. And I think that creates as well some opportunity for us. But it's a risk.
Yeah. So if now we can build faster and more capital efficient, what's left for the VC industry? I mean, what's your role?
Like we go to the beach.
If the startup doesn't need money anymore.
I mean, I can start. Look, what we said is that a lot of the software industry is being disrupted by AI. Some people call it the SaaS apocalypse, etc. That's not where we invest. We invest on software on which AI runs, right? So we invest in those few layers at the compiler level, meaning systems that translate code into instruction sets that the chips can understand, but very close to the hardware, and then to anything that is required by agentic AI. So I mean new security systems, because security systems have been built for humans, but not for agents. So is an agent, authorized to do this and that by himself? Or how does an agent access that particular document? So you need new security paradigm for that. You need new finance paradigm, because if agents are autonomous, then you need to control how much they will spend in credits, in tokens, right? And so there are lots of things in the stack on which AI runs that is not functioning today, and that's a lot of opportunities for investment for us.
Go for it.
No, I think to me, it's a bit like carbon emissions in a way. Like it's like if everyone would agree now to stop, it would be great. But if you stop and the neighbors doesn't do it, then you're fucked because carbons go across the border. And I think in startup financing, it's a bit of the same. Like if everyone was saying now, hey, let's reduce and let's halve the VC industry today, then maybe you could build with less money. But the thing is, no one's going to do this. So you're going to be putting money into a company, and they're going to be either building faster, building more. They're going to be distributing better, distributing faster. So like, there's always a race to the top. And so
acquiring companies.
Exactly,
It's a weapon.
So
money is a weapon, basically, in a war between companies.
So the war is not. Unfortunately, the war is not
Cheap.
ending. And it's not cheap. The war is not cheap.
So you have three of you manage several funds, and then with a portfolio built previous to December 25, when all of this mess of artificial intelligence surprised us, and then you have new investment. What has changed in the way you look at the startups, and what are you doing to defend the existing portfolio and trying to transform what they were building?
I would say it in one word is adapt or die.
Or die.
Yeah. Like for the old companies is you really need to adapt to the new era. You need to bring AI into your operations. You need to bring AI into your product. You need to bring AI into your way of thinking and approaching the world, because AI native companies are already doing that, and you need to transform your software. I hate the sentence of AI is going to kill software. Software, AI, and software are not comparable elements. It's like apples and oranges. Software with AI is going to kill software without AI.
Yeah, it's it's a difficult one. No, it's a difficult one. I think we need to adapt. We see many big funds adapting their strategies to this new environment. We see funds that historically invested only in software have been very successful with SaaS and are going to deep tech. People understand where the value to be created has moved, right? And we see that across many signals around the planet. But there's still an abundance of cash, as Julien said before during the panel. If you're a founder, it's an amazing time to start a company, right? It's not easier to be successful as an entrepreneur, but it's a great time to start. Lots of resources. You need a laptop, Wi-Fi, a subscription to Cloud Code or any other thing, and you can start building. So that's never been a better time for starting something.
But I think to me, you have the pure players who are starting today with the tools that are out there, and that should, somehow follow the playbook we mentioned, although the playbook is still being, designed, but still, modes and distribution and products. And then you have the guys built before, to your point. I think it's always a question of adapting to what's out there. And the previous wave of cloud, you have the incumbents that remain, on-premise and died, and then you have the ones that, follow the path and change. And I think it's exactly the same. We try to tell our companies, look, guys, you need to adapt. Otherwise you're going to die. Otherwise, someone tomorrow morning is going to launch something competing with you with a different, approach to it and kick you out, a bit like you kicked out the previous guys, right? So, and I think founders are quite agile, or if they're not, well, we fucked it up, basically.
We're running out of time. Please, a big hand for these three amazing leaders and investors.